Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, to all our viewers. On behalf of our Orange County, California organizations, the Armenian Revolutionary Federation, Armenian Chapter, our 40 Martyrs Armenian Apostolic Church, our Arigilagos Minas and Armenian School, Armenian Youth Federation, Asho Diergat Chapter, Youth Federation Junior Chapter, Akbir Serop Chapter, the Armenian Relief Society, Sevan and Karni Chapters, Hometmen Sardarabad, ANC, OC, and our Hamaska and Siamanto chapters. And on behalf of the ANCA, we'd like to welcome you all to this Facebook Live event primarily to discuss the Artsakh and the Madrid Principles. But we will discuss the principles through, at first, discussing the ANCA 360 publication that was released back in February of this year, which will highlight the different activities the ANCA has completed or works on for advocating for Armenian issues. Today's guest is Mr. Aram Amparian, our ANCA Executive Director. Welcome, Aram. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Gato. Thanks for having me on board.
Thank you, sir. I want to dive right in and get started with our discussion today. The ANCA 360 policy priorities results in an 8-page deep dive into the ANCA advocacy efforts to advance community concerns. It aligns with a single aim: the security, prosperity, and long-term viability of a free, independent, and united Armenian homeland, which is a direct quote from the cover page of the publication that was released back in February. The 6 main areas of focus are the U.S. policy on Artsakh, U.S. policy on genocide, U.S. Armenian ties, U.S. foreign assistance, U.S. Turkey ties, and the ANCA youth. We're going to start off, we're going to leave Artsakh at the end to get a little bit more into the details of the Artsakh and the U.S. policy and the Madrid Principles. I want to go ahead and directly dive in into the U.S. policy on genocide, if that's okay.
Of course. Thank you, Gato.
On October 29th, the U.S. House of Representatives, with a near unanimous vote, and on December 12th of 2019, the U.S. Senate, with a unanimous vote, passed the Armenian Genocide Resolution. We all know this. This was made possible with the hard work and dedication and decades of long work for ANC had done. Are there any legal implications with the Senate and House passages of the resolutions? Perhaps new doors that have opened up?
Before I talk about the specifics of the resolution and the legal implications, let me just offer a little bit of background. As you mentioned, we have a 360-degree advocacy agenda. A lot of different topics. You might read about the work that ANC is doing on all these different fronts, but rest assured, they are all aligned with a single aim. Our North Star, our Hussein Ask, right? The North Star of the Armenian cause, which, as you mentioned, is the security, the viability, the long-term survival of a free, independent, and united Armenia. And the Armenian genocide issue is a core element of that. And this is very important to point out to those folks who are watching today, Gato. The genocide issue, of course, has a backward-looking dimension. We pray in our churches, we light candles, we mourn our family and the loss to our people, our churches, and so much more. But ultimately, the reason we bring the genocide issue into the political arena in the U.S., in Europe, Eurasia, South America, all across the world, is because the genocide issue is about tomorrow. It is about the security of Armenia. Armenia cannot be secure, bordered by an unrepentant, overarmed perpetrator of genocide. The world, for that matter, can't be secure, given the precedent of a genocide committed, denied, and consolidated with impunity. So the genocide issue for us is a forward-looking issue. We're worried about tomorrow, not yesterday. So that's why the genocide issue has such an important place in our advocacy agenda. And the 2 victories last year in October and December in the House and Senate, essentially unanimous votes. And I think that's very important. We never, ever, Gato, took sides. We never took a vote for granted. We never gave up on a vote. And we ultimately pushed this issue through on its merits, never allowing it to become weaponized by the left or the right. And as a result, we got like 405 votes in the House, 100 votes in the Senate. And that doesn't happen if you play politics. It does happen if you stick to your principles. So that's the genocide issue. It was a really important step forward. We had hoped this April to pivot off that resolution, those resolutions, to get the White House on board, and that didn't happen. And we're disappointed by that. We're dealing with a lot of unique circumstances between the COVID crisis. The Trump administration deals differently with foreign affairs issues than previous administrations, and that did not happen. But that doesn't mean we're not going to double down. We're going to press aggressively to either get this president or the next to end Turkey's gag rule on the U.S. on this issue. So that's our agenda going forward. The next step is that. But there are legal implications, important legal implications, including those based in California. The state government has passed laws in the past that allow for the legal redress for legal cases to be pursued in the courts based on genocide-era claims. Several years ago, the Obama administration came out against that, and ultimately the Supreme Court to hear a case on the basis of what they call federal preemption, saying, well, the federal government has a policy of not recognizing genocide, therefore the courts shouldn't hear cases about the genocide because the lack of U.S. federal action disqualifies the state level activity. Well, we've got a long way toward ending that preemption because a co-equal branch of government, the U.S. Congress, has explicitly said we recognize the genocide, and just as explicitly said we reject the denial of this crime. Now, that's extremely clear. Where the executive branch is not so clear. They're in like a vague area where they're trying not to upset Turkey too much, but also, not upset Turkey too much, but also, are they fearful of the other side as well? They're like kind of stuck in the middle, and they have this like gray area where it's non-recognition, I guess is the best way to describe it. And we're going to end that. And when we end that, there will be new opportunities. Barriers to legal redress will be removed here in the U.S. And I think also it'll have like a political effect on the rest of the world. I think that we'll see more progress in Europe and possibly even in the Turkish courts as denial gets routed. I think that's what we need to do. There's legal implications and political implications, and they're all positive and they're all moving in the right direction.
Just on that political implication side, if I can piggyback on that question or on that statement, what's the perception of the Armenian lobby since the House and the Congress passed the vote?
Okay. I will say this, that we do have a 360-degree agenda, and the passage of the genocide resolution raised the stock of Armenian Americans across the board. So if, there are folks who think that strengthening Armenia needs to be at the front. Others who think that defending Artsakh needs to be out front, and others who believe that the genocide issue needs to be out front. And they're all valid positions. Of course, they all need to be synchronized. But when one advances, when one succeeds, our stock goes up elsewhere. I'll give an example. Some years ago, we blocked an ambassador from serving as U.S. envoy to Azerbaijan because he was just the wrong guy for the job. And we had a major showdown. It took, frankly, years of trench warfare in the U.S. Senate, but eventually Senator Boxer and Senator Menendez and others stepped up and blocked, stopped what they were doing and looked up and said, wow, the Armenian lobby is able to stop an ambassador to halt a promising foreign service career because somebody crossed one of their red lines. That helped us on the genocide issue, just as the genocide resolutions help us on the Artsakh issue and the U.S. aid to Armenia issue. So as Armenians, when the tide rises, all our boats are lifted.
Exactly. I want to get into a little bit around the next topic is the U.S.-Armenian ties. As we all know, last Friday, we just celebrated on May 28th, the 102nd anniversary of the first independence of the Armenian Republic. However, interestingly enough, this year marks the 100th anniversary of the U.S. recognition of Armenia's first republic that was established in 1918. So we have a centuries-old relationship with the U.S. It's a century that we've been working together. How would you evaluate our relationship today, the progress, the challenges we are facing?
I would say that we have done remarkably well in fostering strong U.S.-Armenian relations. I think the foundation for that is our community in the U.S. I think that the most powerful bridge connecting Armenia and America is our community, but also shared values, also shared interests, the ability to work through areas where there's not full agreement. And if you look at Armenia's neighbors to the north and south, there's not always the same perspective from DC and Yerevan, but I think we've managed that in a healthy way. Armenia has been able to, I think, since independence, really find a pathway forward that has good relations with all of Europe and the European Union, the Russia and Eurasia, the Middle East, North and South America. So Armenia has done its job of trying to cultivate strong ties, around the globe, with the obviously the exception of Turkey and Azerbaijan. And we've done our part in the U.S. to make sure that relationship stays strong. It states that has a lot to do with the economic assistance that's been provided, and we've been a big driver of that. But also the pro-trade initiatives. A lot of that got derailed by COVID. But our destiny is not a country that receives aid. Our destiny is to be a great trading partner. Armenians have always been merchants and traders. So we're pushing for tax agreements and social security accords and all sorts of agreements that will strengthen the economic partnership between the U.S. and.
Yes, thank you for that. We want to shift from U.S.-Armenia ties and talking about the independence. How is that the tie, the U.S.-Armenian tie? How do we bring that into U.S. foreign assistance? So, Armenia is one of the highest recipients of U.S. foreign aid. Foreign assistance, humanitarian assistance. We should be clear on that. Over the years, obviously we've seen it go down recently with all foreign aid. What is the ANC? What has the ANC been advocating? ANC has been advocating an aid to trade transition. Have we seen any progress there? And what's the next on the front?
Sure. I'll speak about the aid side and then the trade side. Okay, I'll speak first about the aid side and then about the trade side.
Okay. I can hear you.
On the aid side, we were obviously strongly behind the Spear Amendment, an amendment offered by Congresswoman Jackie Spear to increase U.S. assistance to Armenia by $40 million. To help Armenia make progress and solidify its progress on the democratic path. And that's a very, very large aid priority for us. And we'd like to see robust aid to Armenia, especially the type of aid that's going to create sustainable economic growth. That's the future, not handouts. And, there's all sorts of wonderful kind of social engineering projects that are proposed from time to time here in Washington. But ultimately what Armenia needs is sustained and sustainable economic growth, and that's the future of aid in our view. In terms of trade, we've seen a couple of things that are encouraging, a couple of things that are not. On the encouraging side, we've seen the U.S.-Armenia Economic Task Force, which is a bilateral platform that helps U.S. and Armenia grow the economic relationship. That's been upgraded to a strategic dialogue, and that happened post-revolution in Armenia. We're very encouraged by that, but we have not seen this administration step forward and act on the tax treaty that we need to have. The U.S. and Armenia need to have a tax treaty. People who want to invest in Armenia need to know upfront if they're going to get double taxed, if they're going to make profits and find that both Yerevan and Washington want a piece of the pie. It's not a good formula. So there's several other initiatives that we're pushing, including a social security agreement so that folks can more easily divide their careers between Armenia and the U.S. And even retire in Armenia, with their pension, fully intact. So we're active on the aid front and the trade front, making some progress, dealing with some roadblocks.
I'm sure a lot of us would want to move to Armenia, who plan on moving to Armenia, would like to take our Social Security with us if possible. So the next topic I want to get into is the big, U.S.-Turkey ties. The ANC has been increasing its cooperation with the Hellenic, the Syrian, and groups like the Defense of Christians in an effort to call out Turkey's ongoing repression of its minorities at home and aggression abroad. A great deal of effort as part of the U.S.-Turkey ties has been around the F-35 sale to Turkey. and the ANC has supported the congressional registration to block that sale of the F-35. What are the next steps on that front to keep it blocked, essentially?
Sure. Okay, it's a fascinating issue, Gato, and I recall. Oh, sorry. Okay.
You're good. We can hear you.
Okay, Gato, when we first started F-35, our F-35 opposition, we did so in partnership with the Hellenic American Leadership Council, our dear and very close coalition partners, and we did so with an ad in the New York Times saying, this is where we draw the line. Turkey, which is anti-American and hostile to American allies, should not be written into the most lethal weapons program, weapon system in the world. So we launched that initiative, and there was a lot of skepticism on the Hill, on Capitol Hill, in the administration, and even among Armenians and Greeks who thought, wow, you guys can fight the fight on human rights. You might be able to make some progress on the edges, but now you're dealing with Lockheed Martin. Now you're not dealing with millions of dollars, but actually billions and tens of billions, and as much as $100 billion worth of foreign military sales. So people were very dismissive of it, and we kept our head down, put our shoulder to the wheel, and just like worked it. Brought in In Defense of Christians, which is an awesome partner of the Armenian National Committee. Also, Jewish American groups, including the committee and others, upset with Erdogan for their own reasons. It reached the Hill, and a few members started talking about it. Then a lot of members started talking about it, and then the chairs of key committees started talking about it. And now I think we have something like 7 or 8 pieces of legislation that have passed Congress that say that Turkey cannot be part of the F-35 program at the same time that it's which basically puts in a very unique situation. I think actually a unique situation. It puts Turkey in control of 2 weapon systems that are designed to work against each other: U.S. American attack aircraft and Russian anti-aircraft missiles. So there's a very strong consensus today that nobody could have imagined when we got the ball rolling on this. But I think that there are still interests, very powerful interests, who want to mend fences and want to make it right and want to figure this thing out. And those are primarily Lockheed Martin and the other contractors. I think also the Defense Department is still trying to find this process. I think it's not salvageable, but they're making a very, very robust effort. So that's kind of where things stand with F-35s and
block of them.
I think we're in a good spot.
We're in a good spot. I want to stay on the U.S.-Turkey ties discussion topic and kind of get a status update, if you want to say, sort of. So we all remember 2017 in Washington, D.C., the Erdogan bodyguards horrifically attacked peaceful protesters, and you were live streaming that attack at the time. I think we all were able to watch it. We saw the bodyguards get indicted, but unfortunately, it seems that the State Department is basically letting them off the hook, is what we're seeing. They haven't been called to get any other action. There is a civil court case that's filed against the government of Turkey by those that were attacked. What's the latest update?
Okay, you've given a good outline. So we have this attack. It takes place in 2017. 19 people get indicted for the attack. 2 of them actually get prosecuted. They were U.S. citizens, and they spent about a year in jail. A relatively light sentence for brutal assault. 2 were Canadian citizens and fled to Canada, and we've never heard from them again. And 14 of the Erdogan's bodyguards were indicted, and those cases have essentially been dropped. The Secretary of State Tillerson at the time, who was secretary at the time, basically was visiting Turkey, and like a day before he arrived in Turkey, they dropped the charges, which is like absolutely, utterly shameful. I as you mentioned, Gato, taking part in that protest,
Yeah.
and just, I guess, by was able to live stream it. Got picked up by CNN and AP and New York Times. And I said at the time, and this is just like from my heart, see that, because I was just talking live after seeing all my friends get beat up and bloody, and spending, before I went to the emergency room with them. But the first thought that came to my mind was, and I shared it online, I think it's still up there, was this is a sad day for America. This is a sad day for America. It is, this kind of stuff happens in Turkey all the time. It's unseen. There's no one videotaping it. It's brutally cruel what's happening, especially to Kurds and others in Turkey. But this was on American soil, on video. It's very rare that you get assaults that are so well documented on video, and yet they walked away. And that's kind of like, how do I say, an analogy or whatever. It's a little microcosm of the U.S.-Turkey relationship, that you could attack people, everyone can direct an assault on U.S. soil in Washington, D.C., on camera, and then walk away from it without accountability, with impunity. So that's the nature of the U.S.-Turkey relationship. The exception is 296 and 150 that passed the House and Senate, and our goal is to have more exceptions and make eventually accountability the rule, not the exception.
Thank you for that. Before we get into the next topic, I want to make sure that everybody's aware. If you have any comments, we are live feeding this currently from the ARF Armenian OC chapter page, and we are also live feeding it from the ANCA's Facebook page. If you have any comments or questions that you'd like to leave us, please do so. We have members following, tracking the comments and questions, so we can try to bring those in at the end of the discussion here, once we go through all our different topics. So I want to make sure everybody's aware that we are monitoring for Q&A, question and answers, kind of in the comment section of Facebook. So please make sure you're commenting and asking those questions. The next topic I want to get into, which is, for me, it's near to me, it's near to my heart, and I think that it should be for everybody. It's the ANCs as part of their 360 holistic approach. It's the ANCA Youth, and talking about our youth. For over 35 years, ANCA has had their summer internship, the Leo Sarkisian summer internship program, and for the past 17 years, or close to 17 years, they've also had the Artsakh-Azerbaijan Capital Gateway program. I've had friends and family acquaintances that have joined, have participated in those programs from Orange County as well. Tell us a little bit about those programs, and why does the ANCA, why should we invest in our youth? Let's put it that way, and the return on the investment that we've seen from these programs.
Oh yeah, the absolute best investment we ever make is in our youth. And I say that as we're a nonprofit organization, the ANCA Western Region, the ANCA Eastern Region, the ANCA in Washington. We're a nonprofit organization. We're not, it's not a huge amount of resources, but let me tell you that when we do find that we have resources, we invest those resources in our future, in our youth. So, like, for example, I'll talk about the Gateway program, which is named after Hovig Apol-Saldejan, who is this very devoted Armenian youth from Fresno, who died tragically in a car accident, and whose family stepped up and donated to give a living legacy of Hovig's life to our community. And hundreds, literally, of Armenians have started careers here in DC because of the devotion of Hovig's family. It's really profoundly meaningful for us, and we take every donation like that with great seriousness, because that's the trust of a family, and we take that to heart. So I'll give you an example. We had been doing our Gateway program for a number of years. They started on their careers in government, politics, policy making, media, all the places that Armenians should be in the fabric, let's say, of decision making in our nation's capital. And we would provide free housing, but we realized that we had to stop renting space for them. We needed to own space. We can't be tenants forever. And we was not easy, but we went, and with the help of Sue and Armenian and the Armenian family, were able to purchase an 8-bedroom house, landmark property in downtown DC. It's the Armenian house right at 16th and T Streets in Washington, DuPont Circle, really prestigious place. And that provides an ongoing platform, a place where young Armenians can live while they're looking for work. They get free rent, usually for about 3 months or so. And that was not easy for an organization like us, which doesn't have a huge budget. And with the real estate prices in DC, that's not easy. But we did it because we know that the victory or the success or the barometer of our of ANC is not what we deliver this week, this month, or even this year. It's what we deliver for the next decade and the next generation, and even more. The seeds that we plant today in young Armenians starting careers, that 22-year-old recent graduate who gets a job working for a member of Congress, then works their way up to chief of staff and maybe runs for office one day, or the policymaker who maybe goes to the State Department or goes to the Department of Commerce, or people who get jobs as journalists and work in the media. These things really pay dividends, not upfront, but they're long-term dividends, huge return on investment. So we are immensely committed to the future of our community. And we have such talented kids. Nader, you know this from the young people in Orange County.
Yes.
They're so immensely talented. They have such great educations and they're so ambitious that if you just give them a leg up, give them a free place to stay, give them some training, give them an opportunity, they're going to take off. And their success ultimately becomes our success. So that's the Gateway program is absolutely core part of our agenda. A second part of our youth program is our summer internship, which is called the Leo Sarkisian internship, which is named after one of our great activists from Boston, Leo Sarkisian. And that's a training program. That's not to help people find jobs, although we hope they will find jobs in Washington later. This is for kids in college who join the internship to learn how to speak and fight and advocate for our cause in the political arena. So and so many of the chapter chairs, so many of our community leaders, so many of leaders of other Armenian organizations have come through the ANC Leo Sarkisian internship program. So we never ever lose sight of the fact that the work that we do today is important, but the work that will be done later by others, the next generation, that's the prize. So we're always focused on the prize, which is our youth.
It's handing in. I hope one day my sons, both of them, will join the programs, because I never had the opportunity.
That'd be great.
But hopefully they'll be there, because I think I've seen it at work. We just had our recent last summer, one of our YFLGUNs who joined and was there actually a few months ago, just came back. So it's a great program. I want to just stay on this topic of the internships and the Capital Gateway. How has the pandemic affected these programs, if any? Summer's coming up. Is there a plan to run them? Is there any issues or concerns you guys are expecting to get to see?
Well, the big difference is that this summer internship will be a virtual internship, and that's across the board. This entire city is not hosting internships, in-person internships this summer, and that's for health reasons, of course. And it's understandable. Of course. That's understandable to our young people, but it's also understandable to the parents of those young people. This is safety first. That's our first concern. So the summer internship will be online, and there'll be East Coast interns working with the ANC Eastern Region, a very healthy contingent of ANC Western Region interns, and we'll have interns in DC as well. They'll work remotely from their homes safely, but the work will be just as hard, maybe harder. There's a ton of work that gets done in today's world. So much is done online. I don't think we're really going to lose a step, but it's going to be a new experience, and that's what we're looking for the internship program. In terms of the Gateway program, which is, as I said, a job placement program, the plan right now is to have that in person to welcome people here in September for that program. But the question is, of course, what's the health environment come September? We'll make a decision as we get closer to that point. But the plan right now is to have the Gateway program, the Gateway class, work in DC.
Fabulous. As we see, the ANC just keeps on working, finds any ways to keep the programs running, the advocacy going. Thank you. Finally, we're at the main topic, as we had for this discussion today, and it's, we call it, as part of the ANCA 360, it's called, the U.S. policy on Artsakh. Obviously, this is not just the U.S. policy on Artsakh, because I think Artsakh as a whole around the world, for all Armenians, is it's near and dear to their hearts. It brings back memories of victory, but at the same time, it brings sadness or concern, the oppression our people had gone through, after after Stalin gave Artsakh to the Azeris at the time. So we want to today focus on the Artsakh issue, and specifically around the Madrid Principles. We've seen over the past year, I know I've read a lot of your articles, and different ANC articles, that have addressed the Artsakh and the Madrid Principles issue, and how reckless and horrible they are, to be honest, in that sense. Not that we're not. And over the past year, we've seen the increasing unrest around the peace process for Artsakh's self-determination and security. On most discussions, the center of focus for a peace process are the Madrid Principles, which were endorsed, as we talked about, in November of 2007, during an OSCE ministerial summit in Madrid by the leaders of Armenian Azerbaijan and the co-chairs of the OSCE, USA, and Russian, the co-chairs of the OSCE, which is the organization responsible for the peace talks, and which is co-chaired by USA, Russia, and France. Let's start off with the principles. What are they? Can you explain to us what those principles are?
Sure. As you mentioned, Gato, the OSCE, which is the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, is the mediating body that's dealing with the Armenian side and the Azeri side. And the proposal that they have put forward is called, as you said, the Madrid Principles. There have been different variants, but it's basically the Madrid Principles. They haven't changed a lot in more than a decade. They are a phased approach. When you talk about Artsakh resolution options, there have been, they fall generally into two baskets. There's the package approach, which is everything gets resolved at once. And there's the phased approach, in which, as you might imagine, there's a phasing. There's one thing happens first and the other things happen later. And it's in that phasing that we have our most serious concerns, and I'll explain what those are. The Madrid Principles basically say, and this is, I can go into how these come, they're leaked from time to time, they're denied from time to time, but the outlines are pretty clear. It's something like the Armenian side, meaning Artsakh, surrenders upfront at the very outset, surrenders territory, compromising its security at the outset. How exact nature of the territorial concession is unclear, but it's generally understood to mean 5 regions outside of the Soviet Oblast, right? This is still Artsakh territory, sovereign soil of Artsakh, but the Minsk group says, okay, those 5 territories that are not part of the Soviet Oblast, as if Stalin has some special claim to virtue or the rights of the Armenian nation. That those 5 territories go back right away. Kelbajan, between Armenia and Artsakh, goes back soon after. And then what they say is non-corridor Lachi, which is basically everything but a road and a little bit of a corridor around that road. All those go to Azerbaijan up front. That's day one. Down the road, Azerbaijan would agree to, and this is, I'm not exaggerating this because it simply can't be exaggerated. This is what it says. At some point down the road, Azerbaijan will agree to a process. It's called an expression of will. Nobody knows exactly what that is, but an expression of will. It could be a referendum. We're not sure who votes in the referendum or what question they're voting on, or even when they would vote. Aliyev has joked that maybe they'll vote in 100 years. So at some point down the road, there'll be some process to determine status of what remains of Artsakh. And that's the basic outline of the deal. It is land now, for status later, or you might say land now for peace later, or land now for a piece of paper that talks about status and peace later. Now, those terms are so ridiculously unfair that I don't think I need to say anything more, but there is more to be said. First, I'll start with,
yes, yes.
Would any of the mediators like take a deal like that for their own house? Like, would any one of them, the Russians, the French, and the Americans, would they accept a deal where they sign over title to their home in return for an agreement to talk about compensation at some point down the road? They wouldn't do that for their own home, yet they're asking the people of Artsakh to put their lives at risk, based on the terms that Azerbaijan is basically getting in this arrangement. It gets even worse, though. It gets much worse, because the promise of Madrid is something like, well, the Armenians may not want to give up land, but they might have to. It might be absolutely essential, because that's the only way they'll get the security, the status, and the peace that they want. Okay, I don't agree with that. I don't think many Armenians agree with that. I've yet to come across one, actually, who thinks that's a fair deal. But even if we found an Armenian who thought that was a good deal, you'd have to take into account that Aliyev, and like, for example, his ambassador here in Washington, right, just last week, wrote an op-ed saying, yeah, that's not even the deal at all. In fact, you're going to give up your land day one. All the territories go to the Azerbaijani column. All the soldiers that leave their fortifications, they're Armenians. They're Armenian, ethnically Armenian soldiers in the Artsakh army. They all leave, and in return, you don't get status. You don't get independence. You get none of that. What you get is these are his words. These are his words. A security guarantee that goes to both. This is a security guarantee, by the way, from the Azerbaijani government. Right? From Ilham Aliyev. We get his security guarantee that the Armenian and the Azerbaijani communities of the Nagorno-Karabakh region of Azerbaijan will be saved. So you give up all your land, you give up your security, you put at risk the rest of Armenia, and in return, you get a deal worse than we had under the Soviets. By the way, a deal worse than before Azerbaijan launched a war and lost a war against Artsakh. So having defeated a war of aggression, having established independence, having built a free and open society, holding free and fair elections for more than a generation, we are now going to voluntarily cede all of that in order to go back to where we were under the Soviets. And in the process, trusting Azerbaijan won't then take advantage of those concessions to just press onward. And the fact of the matter is, Gato, that Aliyev has publicly said that Yerevan is Azerbaijani territory, that Zangezur is Azerbaijani territory, and that he's not going to stop with Artsakh. So there's so many problems with it. It's not a fair deal. It's a fake deal in that they're already walking it back. Gato, I think our viewers will remember the protocols.
Yes.
And the protocols were a classic case of where the Armenian side signed something and the Turks signed it, and then as the ink was drying on the contract, on the agreement, the Turks walked away from it and, we're moving the goalpost. This is a bait and switch. You don't just have to make all the concessions in the protocols, you also have to make concessions on Artsakh as well. The Azeris are even more nervy. They are walking away from the deal even before it's signed. The promise of the deal is Armenians get status, Armenians get peace, Armenians get security. And then the Azerbaijani side says, yeah, that's not the case at all. You'll get nothing. You will get nothing. And so, okay, I'll take it a step further, Gato, and I'll one last point.
No, this is perfect.
Dialogue.
This is the dialogue. I mean, you've almost answered a lot of my questions that I had follow-ups with, so this is perfect.
No, but there's a lot to discuss, and I really want to really work through these issues because they need to be understood. Yes. So it's not a fair deal, number one. Number two, it's a fake deal in that the Azeris are walking away from it. Third is it's entirely unenforceable. All the concessions that the Armenian side is expected to make will be made on day one. The Azeris will, at the end of that first stage, control new territory, Artsakh territory, Armenian territory, part of the Armenian homeland. They will control that territory. They will control those fortifications. They will control those heights and that strategic advantage, right? And the Armenian side will hold a piece of paper, a piece of paper. Now, what is that piece of paper worth? If Azerbaijan responds in good faith to an Armenian good faith surrender of territory, then possibly down the road you could have peace. But does anybody believe for even a second that Azerbaijan responds in good faith to an Armenian concession? Isn't it much more likely, in fact, I would argue certain, that they would simply leverage those concessions to then take the next steps, against Zangezur and the rest of Armenia? It's hard to believe that an upfront Armenian concession leads to a less aggressive Azerbaijan. That's number one. The other part about its unenforceability is that the international community has a role here. And let's say Azerbaijan doesn't honor its commitments, and having surrendered these 6.5 territories, the Armenians find themselves under attack. Does anybody think for one moment international peacekeepers from wherever, from Denmark or Indonesia or Canada or wherever, do we think that those countries will send their young men and women to fight and die to protect the citizens of Artsakh? You might. I wouldn't bet on it, right? I
wouldn't put my
fair
life
deal.
on them.
In fact, we've studied the United Nations. No, definitely not. In terms of peacekeeping operations, the United Nations itself did a report and found that in more than 80% of cases in which peacekeepers have been present during attacks on civilians, they have done nothing. They have done nothing. So, as unfair as this deal is, as fake as this deal is, we would, if we were to accept that the international community would words, but of folly. You know what? The people making this proposal, pushing the Madrid Principles, apparently think that we lack common sense, that we lack a self-preservation instinct, but we don't. And we also have read our history, and we know our history very well, and we know the value of a promise, and we know the value of the commitments that have been made to us by the French, by the Russians, by the Americans over the course of decades. So if there was a time, let's say around the First World War, when Armenians got pushed around in the international context, right? And there were great heroes like Vahan Kardashian who pushed back against them, right? And God bless the memory of our great Vahan Kardashian. There are now today many Vahan Kardashians, and they're in Washington and Los Angeles and Boston and New York and in cities and towns across America and around the world. And that kind of game that got played on us in the past will not be played on us again. The OSCE mediators need to go back to the drawing board and come up with a new proposal that respects democracy, that respects self-determination, and dispenses with this reckless idea that we're going to phase the Armenians into oblivion, that we're going to just, lead the Armenians down the path of unilateral surrender in the hopes that Azerbaijan somehow responds in good faith. So that's just a red line. It's a red line. We're not going there.
Agreed. It reminds me of, if I can make the comparison, and correct me if I'm wrong, it reminds me a little bit around the story, with Khrimian Hayrik and the got this shut up, going with the paper, I mean, it's almost like they're saying, sign this paper, and you got no guarantees, and you pretty much are going to give up everything else, and you're not going to get what you want. So
yeah,
I just feel I make
absolutely.
that comparison that we're returning back in history if this Madrid Principles keeps on moving forward. To continue on with the discussion around the Madrid Principles, what's the process? Like, real briefly, I know we talked about it, and in regards to from what it's represented, how does it become a legally binding? Let's just say people miraculously something happens, unfortunately. What makes it legally binding? Is it how does that work? Do we know that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think what the prize here for Azerbaijan is to leverage its relationships with global powers, to use its oil wealth in terms of its providing oil and natural gas to other nations, but also just bribing and bullying people using money. Their aim is to leverage their international relationships to force an Armenian signature on a reckless agreement. And that would be obviously a very, very dangerous thing. We've heard discussion from Armenia, and it's encouraging that anything of this sort would need to go to the population, and I think that the Armenian people clearly would reject a reckless, phased approach like this. This reminds me a little bit of the Annan plan, which was a plan for Cyprus that was pushed very aggressively by the international community, very aggressively. And everybody said it has to happen. If it doesn't happen, it'll be the end of the world. And Cyprus and Greece got marginalized and isolated, and they were threatened with all sorts of dire consequences. But then eventually it went to referendum in Cyprus, and it got rejected, got beaten, very, very badly, because the people of Cyprus have common sense, and they know what is required of their future. And I think we're looking at a situation similar to that. Just because people want to create expectations for us, just because people in fancy suits and with nice letterhead are telling us this must happen, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. We're not the marginalized group that could just be tricked into giving away our land. That's not the case. So that what we need to do collectively, and this is a team effort. This is I think this is a view held in common by all Armenians, and I include the government in Yerevan, the government in Stepanakert, diasporans around the world. We're all united in Artsakh remaining Armenian, and we're all opposed to kind of this kind of reckless approach to handing away territory in the hope of some Azerbaijani goodwill. So I think we're united on that subject, but we need to be strong about it. We need to talk about it. We need to build consensus. We need to send a signal, frankly, to Washington, to Paris, and Moscow that this will not work. You know what? It's a non-starter. You're going to try and sell it. You're going to fail. Better to just rewrite the principles, rewrite them from scratch. Start with democracy. I mean, our equation as Americans would be something like, why don't we just go and do a copy paste from the Declaration of Independence and say that, all men are created equal, all men and women are created equal, and the just powers of government are derived from the consent of the governed. That's a pretty good sentence to start with, right? Why don't we start with that idea? Why don't we take our cues on democracy from George Washington, right? And our own experience with fighting for independence, and not King George, the guy who wanted to keep America a British colony. That would be a good place to start for us. The Russians and the French can start where they want to start, but it has to end with democracy. Democracy and self-determination.
Self-determination, democracy. Those are the key points. I want to get into, the Madrid Principles have been out there for about 13 years, right? And we've been discussing it as Armenians, advocating for not signing it, to get rid of it, throw it in the trash, start new on the peace talks. That's something that would make more sense. But over the past 2 months, we've seen a little bit of a uprise from, we saw that on the comments made by Foreign Minister Lavrov back on April 27th during a virtual meeting between the OSCE co-chairs and Armenia and Azerbaijan. The Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, was asked about the progress of the peace talks, and he stated, and I wanted to quote him on his what he had said. There are Madrid Principles. There are documents prepared by the Russian Federation in 2010, 2011, the so-called Kazan documents. There are projects that are distributed in April last year in Moscow with a meeting of the ministers of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, with the participation of the coaches, and then are now being actively discussed. He further went on to say, assuming at the first stage the solution of the most pressing problem, which are the liberation of the number of areas around Nagorno-Karabakh and the unlocking of transport, economic, and other communications, which you already mentioned, the giving away of lands of the corridor and how, but the comments would suggest a resolution would only come if Artsakh gives up land that is rightly Armenian land and was taken by the selfless sacrifice of our heroes, or the Armenian heroes that fought during the Artsakh War to liberate Artsakh from the Azeris and claim and announce independence from 91 to 94. if any, what have been the fallouts of the Lavrov comments?
Okay. Garo, diplomats are not sort of especially well known for being truth tellers, so I don't know if what he said was true or false. And more broadly, a lot of what is being discussed about Madrid is behind closed doors. It's a confidential negotiation process. So we're in some ways we're kind of privy because there are these leaks from time to time. In other ways, we're in the dark. And so I'm not exactly sure if Lavrov is doing this because he's got some angle. He's trying to push one side or the other, or maybe try to promote the Russian stake in the process. It's not entirely clear. But if what he says is true, then there are things happening behind closed doors that are not reflected in the public statements that are being made, and that's certainly a cause for concern. This really speaks to an aspect of this that I find very fascinating, which is the preparing populations for peace. The mediators have said that that's the new goal. We have to prepare the populations for peace. To which we say, okay, let's prepare, but let's prepare based on the facts. It's very hard to hold a secret conversation, hold a secret negotiation, and then tell people that they should be prepared for peace. Well, that's actually insulting, because it's like a game. You're saying you should be ready for peace, and you might ask, well, what does that peace entail? And they say, well, we can't tell you. Yeah, to which we respond, well, then don't expect us to be prepared. How about we prepare ourselves, right? Let's prepare ourselves. And and really, I think the best preparation would be to study the Madrid Principles. Look, the ANC has a very, very firm position on this issue, but I think that every Armenian across the globe who takes the trouble to Google the Madrid Principles and actually read them will come to the same exact place that the ANCA is in. Now, I'm going to pivot a little bit to this preparation for peace, this idea of preparation for peace. What I found very ominous and actually really troubling was that during a public presentation by U.S. Ambassador Lynn Tracy in Armenia, she announced that they're cutting aid to Artsakh, which is a terrible decision. I mean, senseless and in some ways heartless. But that now the U.S. government was going to pivot away from actually promoting peace by getting landmines out of the ground to this preparing populations for peace, which we can get into. But if preparing populations for peace requires killing a humanitarian demining program, then that's a very, very bad preparation. In fact, that's exactly the opposite of preparing populations for peace. I mean, every landmine accident on either side, Azerbaijani or the Artsakh side or Armenia, these are human tragedies. They're typically farmers. More than half the kids hurt, more than half the people hurt in these accidents are children. And the vast majority of children who get hurt by a landmine will die before they reach the hospital. So this is the idea of the idea that my government, the American government, can say, we're going to help prepare the population for peace. And oh, by the way, that involves leaving landmines in the ground that we could easily remove. That's just terrible. So this, to dig a little deeper, Gato, on preparing population for peace, what we found is that it's immensely asymmetrical. It's very uneven. There's no parity. There's no even-headedness. It goes something like this. Armenia, thank God, is a free society. It has an open media, a robust media. The people, they fight, and debate, and it's really a rich interchange in the in the Armenian media. So what preparing populations for peace entails is U.S. and OSCE diplomats lecturing Armenians within that open environment about what they must concede. It's like they'll give a stern lecture about, you must understand what you have to give up. Don't you know that this is the only way it can possibly be? So we have to suffer that kind of sort of pompous, paternalizing lecture about our destiny. And then across the border in Azerbaijan, where there's no free press, where one family has run the country for almost every year of the past half century, right, where the president and the vice president are married to each other, right, they will get nothing of the sort. The first time some brave junior foreign service officer dares to utter one word about what Azerbaijan must do, they will get hammered mercilessly. They will get threats to be evicted from the country, and the U.S. government will very quickly, very rapidly, shut the heck up and stop that discussion, because Azerbaijan will throw a fit, and the Americans, sadly, and others will stop talking. And that's what this is about. It comes down to, it sounds on the surface, preparing populations for peace. Well, who could conceivably be against that? Well, let's look at the details. If it's just a matter of leaning on Armenia, if it's a matter of arm twisting Yerevan or pressuring Stepanakert, but there's no similar pressure on the Azerbaijani side, then we reject that. We won't put up with that. That's a game. You can't throw out a clever phrase like preparing populations for peace and expect us not to scrutinize it and not to apply rational, real-world tests to that approach. If it's sincere and it's done in a balanced manner, then we can have a discussion. But if it's just an excuse to lean on Armenia and lean on Artsakh, then we're going to reject that very, very strenuously.
Thank you. Through the ENCA's, relationship with the Congress, different congressmen and different political, let's just call it, elected officials and non-elected officials, what is has there been, with recent comments from Ambassador Tracy or Foreign Minister Lavrov, has there been any? What is the stance from there? What are we hearing, if anything, on the Madrid Principles?
It's generally positive.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, almost all of the discussion on Capitol Hill dealing with Artsakh is constructive. Who will, make an anti-Armenian statement? But the general discussion is positive. Most of the opposition comes from the executive branch, and that's clearly under pressure from Azerbaijan. But we have seen, for example, in terms of demining, 2 amendments passed the House in the past 3 years: the Valadeo Amendment and the T.J. Cox Amendment. Last year, I think 89 U.S. representatives and 22 senators. This year, 76 U.S. representatives and 31 U.S. senators defended the U.S. aid program to Artsakh to continue demining. There's legislation before Congress right now to promote U.S. Artsakh dialogue and contacts and communication and travel, because the administration is trying to put a freeze on that. They're trying to isolate Artsakh at the urging of Azerbaijan. So on issue after issue, and I talked a bit about the ambassador being blocked some years ago. The Congress generally adopts a constructive position that's generally on a bipartisan basis, and we welcome that. We always want to grow it, and we are always, in partnership with our ANC Western region and ANC Eastern region, working around the clock to build that support. But I think that what we're hearing from the Hill is generally positive.
Thank you for that. One question that it's more so. Part of this peace process, part of the Madrid Principles, as we said, we highlighted Armenia and Azerbaijan are at the table. As I think a lot of us know, Armenia, when we say Armenia, it's representing Artsakh's interest in this process, instead of Artsakh being at the table as part of this negotiations or discussion around that. Just to highlight, even at after Lavrov's comments from April 21st, the foreign minister of Artsakh, Masih Ismailyan at the time, which got reappointed, I believe, which just got reappointed with the new government under this new president of Artsakh, he emphasized during the ceasefire negotiations how it was a trilateral discussion with Armenia, Artsakh, and Azerbaijan at the table. Why isn't Artsakh at the table at this time in the negotiation process for their own people's peace? At the end of the day, it's their land. We're talking about the Artsakh Sea at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, it's an extremely good question. Artsakh clearly belongs in the peace talks. I think it's a generally accepted principle of international law that agreements should not be made about parties. Agreements should be made with parties, and the idea that anyone else would decide Artsakh's fate is obviously wrong, morally, politically. It's also unsustainable. Azerbaijan obviously is against this, and they think that Artsakh's participation would prejudice the outcome. They didn't feel that way back in '94 when they were suing for peace, when they wanted a ceasefire. They were eager to sign an agreement signed with Armenia and with Artsakh that established a ceasefire, because they were losing on the battlefield. So when they were losing on the battlefield, they were perfectly fine with signing with Artsakh, because they knew that Artsakh's signature mattered. Artsakh's participation mattered. Artsakh's involvement as a full stakeholder was essential to that ceasefire. Now that the ceasefire is in effect, they want to push Artsakh as far away as possible from the process, and that's wrong. It's, as I said, it's wrong on moral grounds, in that you can't make decisions for people. Number two, it's wrong legally. It goes against every principle of international law to sign an accord about a party without the participation of the party, and it's also not sustainable. That if Azerbaijan is in fact interested in a sustainable solution to Artsakh, it needs to sit down at the table with the leaders of Artsakh. That's ultimately where this gets resolved. Ultimately, people talk about the Artsakh conflict. We sometimes say Artsakh is not a conflict; it's a country. It is a country, and it need not be defined as a conflict. But to the extent that there is a difference, it's the difference between Artsakh on the one hand and Azerbaijan on the other. They have differences on issues of status and security. When the OSCE Minsk Group was founded, that was the mandate. That was the mission. How can we resolve outstanding status and security issues? Azerbaijan has used the exclusion of Artsakh as a way to prejudice the outcome of that process. In our view, that the Minsk Group process is to determine status and security, final status and security, right? And that can't be done without Artsakh at the table. Azerbaijan is saying, well, by excluding them from the peace process, we're going to get the outcome that we want. And the answer is they're not. But they're just showing in one more way that they're not a partner for peace. They're not a partner for peace. And their exclusion of Artsakh from the peace process is number one, example number one. Number two is that they're against observers, they're against gunfire locators, they're against any accountability at the line of contact. You have to ask yourself, who is against a gunfire locator system? Who could conceivably not want the world to know who is starting the shooting? Of course, the answer is the people who are doing the shooting. Azerbaijan, the very fact that Azerbaijan is opposed to these gunfire locators, the Royce-Engel peace plan, the very fact that they're against it is solid proof that they're the party doing the initiating the aggression. So on so many fronts, they've proven to be to not be a partner for peace.
Thank you. I want to, in this kind of a discussion, not just around the Madrid Principles, when we talk about the U.S. and kind of Artsakh relationship, right? When we're talking about that, does Artsakh get any U.S. aid?
Yes. Artsakh has, since fiscal year 1998, received over $40 million in humanitarian assistance from the U.S. government. That has an initiative the ANCA pushed starting in '97. It took us about a year to get that going. And for the last 20 plus years, we've had this aid program. And U.S. assistance, the American taxpayer, has funded maternal health care, clean drinking water, and now demining, landmine clearance in Artsakh. And that's in very, very much appreciated. It's an excellent program. It's what we call an investment in peace. This administration has gone after it very, very aggressively. It's almost as if they cut some deal with Baku and they simply will not budge. But this administration has come out against this, and what they want to do is pull the plug on this demining program when it's making tremendous progress, when it's approaching the completion of its mission, when a landmine-free Artsakh is in sight. They want to stop the funding. And it's just a few $1 million a year. It's not a budgetary issue. It's clearly a political issue. And that's kind of where we are today. And I would encourage everybody to go to anca.org/aid, anca.org/aid. Send a letter to your members of Congress. In the next few weeks, the Senate and the House will decide whether or not to write in funding for the demining program in Artsakh, and also for rehabilitation programs that are needed in Artsakh. So this is really exactly the moment when folks need to weigh in.
It's interesting how the ambassador's comments or the State Department, their decision to pull the money from the Halo Trust and the demining activities comes at the same time when, U.S. is spending over, $100 million in military aid to Azerbaijan, if you think about it. And then also at the same time, while they're announcing to stop the Halo Trust, the funding for the Halo Trust, the U.S. aid to the demining activities, Azerbaijan's conducting military exercises on the borders of Armenia and Artsakh. So
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
When I start thinking about this, or we all should be thinking, or I would assume everybody's thinking about it this way. It's like people should understand how our voice should be heard, because it's our tax dollars at the end of the day. As a U.S. citizen, as an Armenian American, it's my tax dollar, my hard-earned money that I go to work every day, going to 100 million going to Azerbaijan. It's a little. We should be asking our, the U.S. Congress, our executive branch, anybody we can, make our voices heard that it's unacceptable that U.S. as Americans, as U.S. citizens, our money should not be going there. And I hope people watching, if there's people watching across the world, they're also doing the same thing in their own countries and supporting Artsakh and talking to their own, within their own political system to make sure that money spent correctly anywhere else this is going to pertain to. We had a couple of questions that come in, one around Artsakh and then one around in general ANCs. I want to hit the first one. And does Azerbaijan control territory of Artsakh through how do they control it? If they do control it, how do they control it? Because I know they don't. It's Artsakh who controls it. They have their own government, but how do they claim that it's theirs? It's their land.
Okay. There's a couple of different layers to this, which I want to talk about.
Yeah.
The Azerbaijani claim to Artsakh is basically a Stalinist claim. In the early years of the Soviet Union, with Stalin driving the process, Artsakh was carved out of Armenia and placed under Azerbaijani administration as part of a divide and conquer strategy to maintain Moscow's influence over the Caucasus region. So that's their claim to Artsakh, is that Joseph Stalin stole it from them. And that's obviously not a legal claim. It's clearly not a moral claim. That's the claim they make. Now, today, thanks to the soldiers of the Artsakh military, Artsakh is by and large free, and it's liberated from Azerbaijani control, but not all of it. There are regions to the north in Chaumian and to the east, and that were occupied by Azerbaijan, and there's a small enclave to the northeast of the Armenian border called Artsakh that is also occupied by Azerbaijan. So any peace deal needs to bring those territories back to Armenia in the case of Artsakh, or the territories of Artsakh back to the Artsakh Republic. But that is really Azerbaijan's claim. They really have no other claim. If you visited Artsakh, you've seen that it is an ancient cradle of Christianity, that there are monasteries going back centuries and centuries that with Armenian script on them. The Dadivank in Artsakh is named after Saint Dadi, Sut Dadi, who himself was a student of Thaddeus, who was an apostle of Christ. This was a location, if not the actual physical structure, established in the 1st century. And those are the roots of Armenian culture and the roots of Armenian Christianity in that part of the world. All the maps of the region going back centuries have recognized Artsakh as an Armenian land. The sole argument that Azerbaijan can put on the table is that the Soviets stole it from them, and that shouldn't be debate. Endorsing Stalinist, cynical moves by Joseph Stalin should not be Western policy, certainly not American policy.
It's not. It should not be. And yeah, for those that have not visited, I mean, I hope everybody has had the opportunity to visit Artsakh, but I'm sure there is people watching us or out there that have it. It is, in my eyes, sometimes it's a more beautiful. I mean, not that it's better than Armenia, but it's a beautiful land, and you should go see that. I've actually had the opportunity to go there a few times, and had the opportunity to even mix in with those heroes that are safeguarding the borders currently, of Artsakh. And when you see them, those young 18, 19-year-old soldiers who are ready to risk their lives to protect their own land, I can't say enough about it. The last question that came from one of the comments from our comment section, it's not necessarily around Artsakh, but in general, I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this, Aram, but what is ANCA's stance on Soros Open Society Foundation and his doings in Armenia?
I haven't really followed it very closely.
Yeah.
I would say this, that the best form of help for Armenia is to help Armenia grow and develop, primarily economically. Armenia needs a sustainable economic growth. The Armenian people, we're an ancient civilization. All the social engineering that needs to take place, the Armenians are more than capable of handling. We're an ancient and very robust civil society. We're a tightly knit community that I think is perfectly capable of sort of dealing with the challenges of our future, both domestically and in terms of international affairs. Mm-hmm. So I would say that if folks want to be helpful, they can be helpful by helping promote sustainable economic growth. If they want to invest in a business. If they want to help with infrastructure, that's I think probably the best place where people can make a difference.
Thank you for that. One final question from my side, as kind of just leads in, not necessarily so, but overall from an Artsakh perception, where is Armenia? What kind of pressure is the Armenian government feeling currently? With everything that's happened, Ambassador Tracy's comments, Lavrov's comments, we saw in the news after Lavrov made his comments, we saw quickly the government of Armenia get up in different occasions between the foreign minister, Mnatskanyan, and the prime minister, Pashinyan, get up and, make certain comments. What kind of pressure are they feeling currently from either the US or from Russia in general, where they stand?
Okay, I think the public comments we've seen from Yerevan have been good and principled positions about the self-determination, and that people Artsakh need to agree to any solution that's put forward. Those are that the public record is a very positive record, and we're encouraged by the statements we've seen from the Prime Minister and the President and the Parliament in Armenia. At the same time, we've been down this road before, and we know that the public statements are not the sum total of what's happening. There is behind the scenes pressure. It will be denied endlessly until it's impossible to deny. And an example I would give is the protocols. Mm-hmm. Protocols were like a ridiculous, reckless surrender on the part of the Armenians. This is going back more than a decade now. But up until the protocols were announced, they were denied entirely. People would say, "Oh, there's no discussion going on," or "We're not involved in that." Or before the protocols, there was something called TARC, Turkish Armenian Reconciliation Committee, which was denied endlessly until it became public in the year. So this is like, we're not children, right? And the fact that we look beyond the public statement is a sign of our sophistication, not of our cynicism. It's the fact that we know that pressure is applied, and the pressure very often is applied to Armenia because Armenia is a member of the community in ways, sadly, that Artsakh is not, and in ways that we certainly are not. The diaspora is not susceptible to pressure. Somebody can come and threaten us, and we don't care because we're indestructible. No one's going to push us around. No one's going to tell us what to do. Right? We're citizens. We're free citizens, and we stand up for what we believe in. Armenia is in a different situation. They're saying the right things, but I guarantee behind the scenes, people are putting pressure on Armenia, with either directly or indirectly by setting expectations. There's all sorts of leverage that the international community has from like the Russian economic leverage, American influence in terms of international lending and things of that sort. There's all sorts of pressure that can be applied. It'll be denied endlessly, but as I said, we've been down this road before, and we have to operate on the assumption. We have to operate on the assumption that Armenia is going to face pressure, and that doesn't mean that's not a value judgment. We're not applying virtue or anything else to this understanding. What it leads us to believe is that we have to do even more. We have to work even harder in Washington, in Moscow, in Brussels, and Paris, and around the world to strengthen the collective Armenian position. When we're finger pointing gets us nowhere, right? What gets us somewhere is rolling up our sleeves and working really hard. Part of that is having discussions just like this, where we talk about the issues and educate our community, and then in turn mobilize that community, our community, to raise our issues with the people who run American foreign policy. If we do that, I think we'll be in a stronger position. But we should never operate on the assumption that everything's fine because people are saying nice things. That's not the way the world works. That is not the way the world works. The world has been, I mean, I don't need to share our history with you. The world has very often been cruel to the Armenians, unforgiving. The betrayals are many, and our eyes are open. Our eyes are open. We're not the community that gets pushed around anymore. We're not the nation that gets pushed around anymore. Those days are over, precisely because we scrutinize the global developments, and we keep a very careful eye on those who would seek to advance their interests at the expense of the Armenian nation.
Thank you. The next question I had came from one of our viewers, but I want to use it as our kind of last question and give you the forum for closing remarks, if there's anything else you'd like to add. So the question that came in is, if you were to rewrite the Madrid Principles, what would it look like to you? Is the question that came in. So I'll let you have the floor at the same time.
As I mentioned earlier, I would work off the Declaration of Independence. I think if the Declaration was good enough for our founding fathers, it should be good enough for Artsakh. I think the point here is that Artsakh isn't asking for any more rights than others enjoy around the world, but certainly not any less rights. And the principle we would argue, and it would be the foundation of the Madrid Principles, is democratic self-determination. The United Nations, founded in the 1940s, started with less than 50 members. Today, because of decolonization, because of democracy and self-determination, there's more than 190 countries. Every one of those countries, because of some process that led to their freedom, right, over some foreign rule. We would argue that Artsakh should not be the exception to that. So an agreement would be something like the citizens of Artsakh should determine their destiny, right? And they should work out collectively with their Azerbaijani neighbors the types of security arrangements such that Azerbaijan can develop peacefully and Artsakh can develop peacefully. Whether the citizens of Artsakh then choose to join with Armenia or remain independent, that's a judgment that they will make, right? Just as we as Americans, cherish the right to make decisions about our future, right? Those same rights should be afforded to people of Artsakh. So that's the solution. It's pretty simple. And by the way, it's not like we're asking for special treatment. This is American history. This is the history of almost every country that's become independent over the past half century. So that's where I would start. Cut and paste the Declaration.
Thank you. That brings to the end to the question and answer session here. Any closing remarks? Anything that you would like to add to today's discussion?
Sure. Garo, let me end with just a rhetorical question. And I think it's a question that we should ask ourselves, and we should ask everybody else, including our members of Congress, our State Department. And that question is, does anybody believe that more land, does anyone believe that more land will make Azerbaijan less aggressive, or that less land will make Artsakh more secure? I think if we think about that question, we'll move in the right direction.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Adam, for your time. I know you're in Washington, D.C. It's East Coast for you, so it's late. I appreciate it. Thank you to our viewers. I did not start this discussion with an opening remarks, because I wanted our questions to lead us into kind of why we are here today. As you stated, Adam, it is our duty as Armenians in the U.S., in the diaspora, in Armenia, to educate ourselves, and then to talk about, so we can talk about the issues with the best knowledge we can to fight for our rights, for our people's rights, not just on Artsakh, but throughout. We went through today, as you guys heard, to the viewers. We went through 6 different sections of the ANCA 360 holistic approach. I don't think this is only an ANCA 360 approach. This belongs to all Armenians. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, and we believe that. That's why we, when I say we, united, the ARF Armengado, united with our sister organizations, with our church, with our Armenian school, to have this discussion today and present it to our people in this pandemic where everything is online and we are watching. We can use, we have in the 21st century here, we have the technology to be able to follow and learn using the internet. We are lucky here, unlike other countries where they don't have that. So let's use it. Let's make our voices heard. Let's unite together and protect Artsakh, protect the Armenian interest here in the US, especially for our US audiences. Thank you again, Aram, for joining us. Job well done at the office. I know you and all the staffers, ANCA, dedicate your time tremendously to the Armenian cause and advocate for the Armenian people, not only here in the US, but also obviously in Armenia and Artsakh. So I thank you very much. Thank you to the viewers for your time. Hope you enjoyed it and obtained good information, knowledge that you can put to use as we reach out. And don't forget, as Aram mentioned, in the next couple of weeks, that aid is critical. So go to the, if I'm right, anca.org/aid, it was, and send a letter to your congressman in supporting, to make sure they're supporting funding for the demining activities. Thank you again. Everyone have a good night. Hope you stay safe in this time, and good night.